So let's talk about big picture, and then we'll start drilling down. So big picture, when you say, somebody says, what's the Popeye plan? What's the big picture of what the Popeye plan is to you?
I think I just mentioned that to you. This is an internal 95. I hate this phrase 95% because it's abused terribly, but the vast majority of situations are internal transfers.
Okay, so I'm going to slow you down to have the conversation. So what we're talking about is an internal transfer from the owner to the management team, from the owner to children or relatives. Kind of, that's what we're thinking about. This is not an ESOP. A lot of times somebody, this is not an ESOP. This is totally different. So
that's correct.
So step one is it's an internal, transition. Go ahead.
All right. And you have to basically have the characteristics that an internal transfer is normally going to have in your marketplace. All right. So for instance, in the marketplace that we deal with, an internal transfer to a family member, a key individual, or a key management group, the characteristics that you're dealing with here are A, the owner needs to get some value for the business, okay? And then B, he's got a group of people that he thinks are the likely next generation owners of the business, okay? Either family or the other folks that we talked about.
Sure.
You got to have those characteristics. But the problem with all of that is typically the people that we just described as the next generation owners don't have the asset base or the capacity to go out and finance a transaction. And that means that the transaction is going to be owner financed. And so it's likely to be something that the existing owner, and I always try and stay away from buyer and seller in these transactions for reasons that we'll talk about. So the person that currently owns the business and is transitioning out of it is going to end up having to receive money for the value of this business over time, because the people that are buying it don't have the cash up front, and nor do they have the resources to go out and borrow it from the bank. And if they have some resources, the bank isn't going to lend the whole amount without a personal guarantee on the part of the individual. And then they're dealing with paying back notes. So the whole thing turns out to be 5 years, 10 years long anyways. So it looks like an installment transaction, and the client is going to get the value of the business over some period of time. And so that's issue number one. Issue number two is you have to understand, and you and I do, and most clients, when you talk about it, get it, but they don't think about it intrinsically. Every single business owner buys himself out. It's just the way it is.
Right.
If I'm going to transition my business to you, you're either going to give me a big wad of cash that you have, but the decision that you have for giving me a big wad of cash is, what is the capacity of this business to pay me back some reasonable rate of return that I could otherwise get if I deployed this in this asset, this money, in a way that wasn't involved in your business? And so that's EBITDA and multiples, all that kind of mess. So clients don't seem to get that. Okay. It's like, yes, I'm transitioning my business to you, and now they're taking that income and giving it back to you, and it has to be a multiple. Okay.
Right.
And so once you understand that basically you're buying yourself out, then the issues associated with succession and transition come into play, which is, hey, if you were 40 and you could do this transaction when you were 40, but you're not interested at that point because you still got your life ahead of you, more things to do. So there's all this subjective stuff. Am I tired? Is there some other thing that I want to do so that you have a profitable business, and now I want to find a way to monetize it to this particular group, but it's going to end up taking time anyways. And so if it's going to do that, hey, is there any way to make the transition or the transaction more efficient than it traditionally is? And that's what I call the quandary, because to your point, when we get to the transition or succession, most people think, okay, I'm ready to move out of my business, so I have to sell it and somebody has to buy it. And when I have a seller and a buyer, by definition, I have a taxable transaction, and that means I'm going to pay capital gains. And the beauty of the Popeye Plan and what Ron Clausen found in his research of and Ron Clausen is the attorney in California who I think is a brilliant guy. 20 years ago, promulgated this particular process, and I have since befriended Ron, talked to him many times. And he figured out how to, in that set of circumstances, be able to transition a business without the imposition of capital gains or the necessity of the next generation owners to acquire loans or financing or anything of that nature. So in our discussion, we can simply say, if I have a $10 million business, I can sell this without the imposition of capital gains. And if I use a 30% capital gains rate, I now saved $3 million. And the person buying this can theoretically buy a $10 million business for $1. And so it's a good deal for the transitioning client, and it's a great deal for the next generation owner, given the facts and circumstances we talked about.
Love it. I think that phrase right there is the person that owns the business today stepping away without having to pay capital gains, and the people buying this $10 million, this asset of the owner for $1, and I know that's generally speaking, but it's just a really nice way to start looking at that to say, okay, now you've got my interest. So
yeah, it's usually a good opening, a way to open a discussion with a client.